Let's go. We don't have
Let's
much
go.
time.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to welcome you today in our panel on justice and reparation for whistleblowers organized by the Institute for Human Rights along with the National Whistleblowers Group. Since we have noticed a systematic lack of attention to whistleblower phenomenon in the Human Rights Council, we would found it particularly important to have this discussion today and emphasize the crucial role of whistleblowers playing in the modern world. While uncovering corruption, safeguarding democratic values, and promoting transparency within both public and private institutions, their actions often come at great personal risk. Therefore, it is essential to address the importance of protecting those in the forefront of exposing wrongdoings. During this panel, learning from the experience of our esteemed panelists, you will know more about the most effective mechanisms to combat corruption and strategies to ensure transparency in your own countries. Today I am honored to have Mr. Stephen Cohn, one of the world's most influential whistleblower attorneys, a chairman of the board of the National Whistleblower Center, and one of the top 200 U.S. attorneys according to Forbes 2024, and Mr. Amin Husseinov, whistleblower, human rights defender, and chief executive officer of the Institute for Human Rights. Before we begin, I would like to kindly remind you about the UN rules of not taking any pictures during the event, except of those assigned by their organization. And let me start with Mr. Husseinov. I would like you to delve into more details on why you found it important to raise a whistleblower issue in the United Nations Human Rights Council. Amin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm welcoming all of you, and thanks for finding the time to join us. And especially I would like to say thanks to Steve for his managed to come with his busy schedule. And I want to congratulate him because Forbes put him on the 200 most effective lawyers in US for 2024. And it's a big honor for us you are here today with us. So, I'm Amin Husseinov, I'm from Azerbaijan. I'm human rights defender with 20 years of experience, but I started my work as like a journalist, investigative journalist, and a whistleblower. And I believe it's defending mechanisms for whistleblowers, clear rules, and mechanisms for protections of them, they are most important. Unfortunately, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, we didn't see like a practical rules, and our skills is also very limited, and we're not able to be effective whistleblowers for our communities and for our own. I just try to remind you, I'm from Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is like an oil and gas rich country with a ruling regime which is staying in power more than 31 years. And it's clear for the country which is only existed as like independent state 33 years. 31 years we have only one ruling tribe with which is most kleptocratic regime. And unfortunately this year Azerbaijan hosted most maybe globally important event which is named COP29. To who which is don't familiar with the process, it's like biggest UNFCCC event with more than 75,000 attendants, and Azerbaijan during the 10 days from 11 of October until 21st, from 11 November until 21st of November, supposed to host more than 70,000 guests, including dozens thousand journalists, civil society leaders, environmental activists, human rights defenders, head of the states, high-level officials from different parts of the world. And we are We believe it's more than 150 head of the state planning to attend to this event. And unfortunately, today we have a huge crackdown, and one of the sensitive stakeholders who affected with this COP29 is environmental stakeholders. We have like more than 15 months ago serious issues with when few whistleblowers reported to independent media about serious environmental problems in the west-north part of Azerbaijan. Literally, golden mining company, which is Anglo-American Golden Mining Company, which has produced gold in the partnership with the ruling family members. It's like, we believe it's absolutely corrupt international company, which is have a beneficial owners from US, UK, and Azerbaijan. And from Azerbaijan, they are partners, as I said, ruling family members. They hide by years serious environmental problems, and when these whistleblowers reported to us, and people start to make a protest, when journalists start to cover the stories, now up to 10 whistleblowers arrested. And we don't know, they are staying in pretrial detention centers even without access to lawyers. They are tortured. We don't know what's happened with them. And this village, Soyudlu village, which is population of this village, it's up to 1,000 people. This village population organized peaceful protest in the middle of the last year. And hundreds of people injured, tortured, most of them women and kids and older people. And still, impunity continued until today. Whistleblowers and peaceful protesters, we don't know what's happened with them because this village right now under total police control, no one able to go there. And because Azerbaijan hosted COP29, Azerbaijani government don't have interest to bring anyone in this village. Let's say it's like looks like a concentration camp in the COP29 host country. There is one part which is I would like to mention about problem related with environmental whistleblowers, and another part, since I said for Azerbaijan is one of the most corrupt regime, and according to Transparency International, Azerbaijan is in the top of the 10 countries in the world with highest rating of corruption. Still, for the last 30 years, we also observe international impunity. And Aliyev, he gets richer and richer, and his family members. And even we report about their illegal assets in abroad, nothing still happened until today. And recent stories, for example, why we invited Steve to share us with the practical mechanisms which is US already have. Why, when you ask Diana, why we would like to do this, because we would like to ask Human Rights Council, like-minded states especially, like UK, France, Germany, Switzerland, and other democratic European states like Australia, New Zealand, to start to thinking about realize the same legislative initiative which is US have for the last 15 years. And here, because without this, we can't change situation. Banks, especially, who launders like billions, sometimes trillions of dollars around the world every year, this is like a vessel, blood vessels of our planet. And if these international financial institutions able to continue to do wrong things, we will never able to celebrate victory for the human rights, democracy of the rule of law. And I would like to stop here. And I thank you, all of you. Please.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you all for attending, and thanks for the invitation. I actually come to bring, I think, very good news of anti-corruption and the ability to fight and win. The strategy that now exists, the laws that now exist that have transnational application can beat corruption. Whistleblowers from every country in the world can take advantage of US-based transnational whistleblower laws to anonymously and confidentially report serious corruption, regardless of the country for which it is occurring, to appropriate law enforcement authorities, to trigger some of the most important anti-corruption investigations ever, to obtain full compensation, accountability, and justice. The information I will briefly share today, but which is also in the book for which we are distributing, and I thank the sponsors for making that possible, is revolutionary, but unfortunately very unknown. So let's start the slides. I don't need this, just only do the slides. We don't need the pictures. Okay, so this is just the no-brainer of the day. Going against fraud without whistleblowers is as useful as harvesting acres of corn with rusty old scissors. Okay, it's clear. If you're paying a bribe, you don't do it publicly. It has to be done in secret. White-collar crime, crimes of corruption, are crimes for which there are no visible victims, like murder or robbery. In fact, in money laundering, hiding the beneficial ownership of ill-gotten gains is like that's how it's done. So without an insider, you can't fight corruption, period. Next slide, please. So our new laws are ingenious. They're actually based on an understanding that corruption and human rights violations often or almost always have a financial basis. And looking at the finances and the capital flows of the corruption is a weak link among our targets. The banks they put the money in, the cryptocurrencies they buy. This is a weak link. And because these banks are often international, they can get targeted and hit. We'll explain that. But again, if you're fighting a war against corruption, you have to study your enemy, figure out their weak links, and hit them. Next slide, please. The law I'm going to discuss first is the recently enacted Dodd-Frank Act. It's a major securities law covering securities and commodities, but critically, it covers the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is foreign bribery. So you have, through Dodd-Frank, the first transnational anti-corruption law, and it was passed in 10, so it's been in operation for 14 years. The OECD audited the application of this law, and this is their conclusion. It constitutes a good practice, powerful incentives for qualified whistleblowers to report foreign bribery. Well, I'm not going to go into the details, but mark my word, almost every publicly traded company in the world is covered under this, whether it trades in the Paris Stock Exchange, the London Stock Exchange, New York. The United States pushed out the interpretation and the transnational coverage of this law to assist in the worldwide fight against the bribery of foreign officials. What's incredible about this law is it targets the highest ranking officials, ministers, presidents, people with real power in the victim countries. And as I say, it has these incredible whistleblower provisions. Next slide, please. When the whistleblower was given full confidentiality, full anonymity, guaranteed by law, and financial incentives, which mean if you risk your job, your career, even your life and your family's health, if you put that at risk and your information leads to a successful enforcement action holding corrupt people accountable, you shall obtain significant financial compensation. In short, it converts whistleblowing from something that would be great in a Cervantes book, Shoot the Windmills, Mr. Don Quixote, into a rational activity for insiders, knowing that they can operate with full confidentiality, give their information to highly qualified investigators, find the corrupt officials accountable, and obtain significant compensation. So what happens in the workplace, in the real world, when you put this type of procedure into practice? The number of whistleblowers skyrockets. Because guess what? There's a lot of people out there, even in high-ranking positions, who hate corruption. But in most countries, there's very little alternative. There's very little ways to have your voice heard effectively. Door opens, and this, as you can see, in 2012, this law was on the books for 2 years. There were 3,000 people came forward. By 2023, 18,000 whistleblowers in that 1 year alone stepped forward. You can begin to see a change here. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the whistleblowers can obtain an award. That is the incentive. That's what drives them. And you can see in 2011 and 12, when the law was first passed, like no one's getting anything. But check it out come 2023. That was, I think, 1.9 billion. This year, the United States government paid whistleblowers under this one law, and we have a number of laws, I'm only talking about one law, over $2 billion. This is such a radical game changer. The whistleblower, from being hammered, fired, shot at, imprisoned, becomes wealthy, wins. It is such a turnaround, such a powerful tool. Yet I will guarantee you very few people here have ever even heard of it. I have spoken in country after country. I've spoken before delegations by the State Department of approximately 80 different countries. No one's ever heard of it. That's why we're here, and I thank the invitation. Next slide, please. This is a quote from the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the agency that administers the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act cases. And this is what they say: it is a fundamentally international program. The first transnational whistleblower law, open for business. Next slide, please. Between 2011 and 2021, which is the last year we gained statistics, the countries in dark blue had over 25 whistleblowers, in light blue, less than 25. Over 135 countries. So whistleblowers around the world have started using this law. Now, what's critical here is I'm painting a very good picture, and it is a good picture. But this law has very specific requirements. And the problem we have seen and why we are going on the road internationally is that so many people who could qualify for an award and protection miss the opportunity because they don't understand there even is a law. And when they actually use the law, it's often too late. But what you can see is any mythology, any lie that people around the world won't blow the whistle, won't respond to incentives, is refuted by the empirical evidence. Next slide, please. Now, this is the transformative nature of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act when combined with whistleblowing. The countries in black are where the corporations have paid the bribes. And we know that. We know that Western companies go into the developing world and pay bribes for whatever reason to gain economic advantage, at least to drill oil. Well, we have cases all over the place. They pay bribes to cover up environmental violations. They pay bribes to move product through ports. Bribes are paid. And you can see the countries that do it. So whistleblowers within these countries all are qualified. But now look at the victim countries, the countries whose rule of law is being undermined, the countries whose ministers and presidents are being bribed up. And what does that mean? They don't want to give up power. They will abuse the human rights of people who challenge them, and they're all criminals under law. These are where the bribes are being paid. But what's interesting is in each of these countries in red, there has been a successful prosecution. It's not mythology. It's not sitting back and saying nothing can ever change. We've been beating the corrupt people in all the countries in red. Now the countries in maroon, and between these are countries, they pay bribes, they take bribes, they go both ways. Okay. So that's what happens also. But they're being beaten in case by case. Have we turned the tide and stopped foreign bribery? Absolutely not. But is there a tool that, if properly implemented and understood, could significantly aid in this war? The answer is absolutely yes, proven with empirical data. Next slide, please. This slide and the one after tells a large part of the story. And I'll explain it. These are the companies that were paying bribes. Almost all of them not stationed in the United States. And when we talk transnational, the fact that Glencore, a Swiss company privately held, can be held accountable is telling you about the scope of the transnational nature. Going to this line, this is the amount of sanction. Unless the punishment is severe, anti-corruption laws are useless. So many countries, people can't get found guilty, penalties are minor, that law is irrelevant. Our law has fantastically high sanctions, and you can see 2.9 billion for Goldman Sachs, bribery in Malaysia. Credit Suisse, 257 million. Mozambique was the victim. And you can see it. This here is telling you something else, and this is what we have seen. It is an incredible interest among honest law enforcement at the grassroots level to cooperate in prosecuting these cases. Now, we will never take a whistleblower to a foreign country, to a foreign country's law enforcement agency, ever. I trust none. We will only go to the United States. But the United States prosecutors to whom we trust then can say, it's okay to talk to this person, it's okay to work with this office, build a stronger case. But so what you can see here is on the grassroots level, prosecutors have already shifted. NGOs haven't. Human rights defenders haven't. The news media hasn't. But this shift is occurring. Next slide. These are just more cases. 700 million, 22 million, 75 million. Look at the countries for which we are successfully fighting it. And the companies. This is a case that I did, Viatal, first one under commodities, largest oil trader in the world. They got off easy, 135 million. I'm waiting for the next case. Okay, next slide, please. Now, this is something else that is totally revolutionary, but hidden from public view. Not consciously, it's just no one's following it. I don't understand. I don't understand why those that are fighting human rights and corruption are not blasting this in every country. Why? Okay, I'm a little excited about that. That came from the United States. What the heck? Okay, what this is, when we sanction the fraudster, the corrupt people, where does the money go? Well, a whistleblower is entitled to an award mandatory under law, so the whistleblower gets paid. The U.S. government takes the money. The money can be used to directly compensate victims. So if you can figure out who the victims are, that can all happen. But the United States has now engaged in a practice of compensating the local law enforcement authorities that have helped in the corruption case, to give them financial resources to build anti-corruption infrastructure. In other words, this is Robin Hood on steroids. We're not taking a little guy down the road. They're taking billions from the corrupt and giving it to the whistleblower, but also reinvesting it in anti-corruption. So you can see, in the Goldman Sachs case, the UK got 126 million. And you can see it up and down. Glencore, they kicked over to the Swiss law enforcement agency. That's kind of interesting. And UK, 165 million. Case that we did, which was the Danske Bank case, 2 billion collected in sanctions, and they gave about 400 million to the Danish authorities. Think about it. Prosecuting the fraudsters, prosecuting the corrupt, getting significant financial damages, paying the whistleblower, and then reinvesting it to further anti-corruption efforts. Well, here's something else. Human rights defenders and NGOs are fully eligible to request compensation and support. Under the US laws, 25% of many of these fines and penalties can go to beneficial purposes. Yet the NGO community is on the sidelines. Now, I don't think for nefarious reasons. I just think nobody knows about this. Next slide. Just more money to more people. Next slide. Okay. So these are quotes from the SEC when they first confronted a non-US citizen whistleblower who reported foreign bribery. And they had to make a decision. Will we give awards to non-US citizens who report crimes outside the United States? You can read it. It's online. $30 million allowing foreign nationals to receive awards. So when I say it's open, and when I say awards can be large, just think of this for a second. A whistleblower in a foreign country, most likely with no whistleblower rights, whom if they were identified by the government could be in jail right now today, gets $30 million for doing the right thing. Since the awards are a mandatory 10%, can be as high as 30%, you can pretty much assume that this was about a $300 million case. Everything's kept secret for confidentiality. Next slide, please. And this is just, again, another decision. And look what it says. It makes no difference if it's a foreign national. Information submitted overseas. Misconduct of the laws overseas. Transnational. Next slide, please. This is a decision published by the SEC. And after, I can show you, go right online, find these decisions. And what's fascinating, to protect the confidentiality of the whistleblowers, every identifying fact is hidden. Who the company was, who the whistleblowers were. But in this particular case, it looks like there were 10 whistleblowers applied for awards, and the misconduct, I know this to be a foreign corruption case because we had involvement in this case, FCPA. 3 separate countries were being, their rule of law undermined, their officials being bribed up, 3 countries. This company got caught bribing 3 countries. Next slide, please. And this is from the decision. They find 7 whistleblowers eligible for awards, and now you can see how much money the 7 got collectively, $104 million. Now, one guy may have got $100 million, and the other people got a couple $100,000. They don't explain that in the decision. But again, this is a decision where bribes were paid in 3 separate countries. 7 qualified whistleblowers had the courage to come forward. They maintain their full anonymity, and they get $104 million. I can't imagine, for those of you who suffer in countries with no good rule of law, in authoritarian regimes, in regimes where human rights defenders are under attack, can even imagine how this can be. But it is. It is. Next slide, please. Now we tell the bad story. The OECD, whose slide I presented earlier, and says this is a great program, studied how it's actually operating. And this was in an audit conducted by non-US people, people from other countries. I was really impressed how they understood this. This is telling you of these were the successful bribery cases and how the United States government learned of them. Media reports. Whistleblowers go to the news media all the time. They're confidential sources. Based on our review of the law and the implementation, every one of those whistleblowers was initially eligible for an award, but yet we have found none being granted because they didn't understand how to file. Civil or foreign government referrals. So this is a whistleblower going to a foreign government agency or to an NGO. Again, they don't know how to file. And in reviewing the case law, it looks like pretty much no one's gotten a dime. Corporate self-reports. You can report internally to internal compliance and still qualify. There's been a couple of those. We don't know if they're international or not, but I will guarantee the vast majority of whistleblowers who report internally have no idea that they can qualify. Law enforcement, that means directly going to the government, 10%. So if you're relying upon the government to fight this, you're going to miss 90% of your cases. That's where you're going to find most of the whistleblowers. They figured out somehow, a whistleblower, say in Mozambique, figured out to file with the SEC. I have no idea how they can do that. A couple do come to our office. We have been filing international cases, very large international cases, but again, a tiny amount compared to what's out there. Then the 40% are whistleblowers, and again, undefined. We don't know how they reported, whether they were qualified. Next slide, please. This prompted the OECD to make a formal recommendation to the United States government that they enhance the guidance for the variations and protections. They clearly were seeing how there were qualified whistleblowers being denied or didn't know their rights, and they said to the U.S. government, train. And it's one of the only recommendations that has not been followed. There's no training. We've done 2 big trainings in Mexico that we have done. The U.S. Embassy invited us down to do trainings. Then the U.S. Embassy, working with us, brought 30 anti-corruption NGOs and other officials to the United States to talk to the SEC and the Justice Department and the Treasury Department to learn how this is done. But we did that, National Whistleblower Center and my firm. United States did not, although the embassy did sponsor it to their credit. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. Got to see my time. Next slide, please. So we have now, dealing with this issue, have formed what we are calling the International Whistleblower Alliance. And it's quite simple. We want to work with human rights defenders worldwide to educate your organizations, your newspapers, your people on the internet or however as to what laws are covered, how you qualify. My law firm will review pro bono and free of charge any referral just to see if it's covered. And we're also seeking cooperation because there are literally, I counted in 2023, with all the programs combined, about 50,000 whistleblower claims, and the United States has the capacity to investigate maybe 1,500 of them. So in the United States, we need to pressure our officials to fund the programs more, conduct education, and really bring this tool out. This is our program. Next slide, please. And so you know these are the laws. Money laundering was just passed. We worked for 2 years to get Congress to pass the Anti-Money Laundering Whistleblower Enhancement Act. National Whistleblower Center, my firm, 2 years. We wrote the amendments. We got it passed unanimously without any Democratic or Republican opposition in the United States Congress. I can tell you why. Because we also represented the Danske Bank whistleblower. And if anyone followed that case, that was documented $240 billion over a 10 or 15-year period, money laundered from Russia and former Soviet republics into the West. It's the largest money laundering scandal.
And Ukraine.
Yeah, largest money laundering scandal in history. And we just went to Congress and said, I know there might be differences of opinion, but in the United States Congress, Russia is not like up on the list. So we explained that this law would be fundamental. This is what's needed to fight money laundering. And look at the Danske Bank scandal, how bad it was. And they passed the law. And money laundering, I don't want to go into details, but since that's all the financial flow of corrupt money, it is the most powerful transnational whistleblower law conceivable. I just want to, again, take a couple of questions. I know we're running out of time. I did pass out, this is my joke of the day, this little paper that I think many of you have. So, the first real international whistleblower case that set the precedents, that got things moving, was when a UBS whistleblower here in Switzerland blew the whistle on UBS Bank for illegal bank accounts. In looking at this, you were looking at banks overseas engaging in misconduct covered under US law and now bringing out a whistleblower. The whistleblower, there are a lot of issues with the case, but I will tell you, in September of 2012, that whistleblower was awarded $104 million. Largest award ever at that time. We did represent him. We fought very hard for that. Coincidentally, when that award was announced, we did a press conference. We were unaware, it's on page 127 of the book, but this is my favorite part. We were unaware that here in Geneva, at the Hotel President Wilson, there was a meeting of all the big bank executives for Switzerland. And they flipped out because it's the deterrent effect, the fear of detection. They realized that every Swiss banker could turn in their US clients and become multimillionaires. They freaked out. These are quotes. Luckily, there was a reporter from Agency France Presse present. This is so funny. First, these bankers and their advisors stood up and attacked the whistleblower. Quote, total lack of morality. Then they made other quotes that the reporter put down and published. Driven a nail into the heart of the invincible Swiss banker's secrecy. Here's another one. Quote, the storm has swept everything away. Here's another quote. Bank secrecy is no longer there. Gone. Over. So the United States was smart, and this is what I'm saying. The strategy to fight corruption is not just a whistleblower and not just a successful prosecution. You need a strategy. They were smart, and it really sets really the tone. They said, okay, you guys know you got a lot of whistleblowers out there. We're going to get you. If you voluntarily come in, turn in your U.S. clients, pay fines and penalties, we won't hit you so hard. We'll give you lesser penalties. We won't bankrupt you, and we won't put you in jail. So come in and make a deal. These are the Swiss banks that came in and dumped every U.S. client, paid billions in penalties, and the United States didn't have to lift a finger except for sign settlements and take checks. I mean, there it is. The deterrent effect, once they realized they could be caught, was no one believed this. And this is the foundation of what you're seeing today as people are plotting, are thinking, how can we actually turn the tide against corruption? Now, we also had the honor of representing whistleblowers from banks that didn't make it on this list because you had to come in voluntarily, and they did not do very well. For example, the Wegland Bank, the oldest bank in Switzerland, they didn't come in. They were criminally prosecuted, bankrupted. Whistleblowers there did very well. Other banks suffered the same fate that did not come in and plead. So I could keep going for another couple hours, but we'll take a couple questions.
There is in no way I want to stop you, but we do have time restrictions, and I would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. If there are any, you can raise your hand or the name tag.
I have one question first.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you for a great presentation. Steve, my question's related with indirect whistleblowers and civil society and independent or investigative media outlets. Sometimes they are exposed to huge corruption, and in some cases they are even first whistleblower indirect whistleblower, but not original source of information, did these people allowed to get any awards? For example, in perspective of Danske Bank, I personally give testimonies, whistleblower testimonies, to the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, to Torbjørn Jagland. It's Norwegian politician, Secretary General, and I'm reported about huge grant corruption when Azerbaijani government distributed illegal financial assets to bribe Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly politicians. We didn't mention bank. I'm showing him person, Luca Valonte, and I tell them, could you please start investigation and check his bank account and his family members' bank. But they say, as for we not police institution, we can't investigate our member politicians or member state. But likely, whistleblower from the Danske Bank do important and good job, and he's exposed this corruption. And after we can show to all the world, look guys, we reported years ago about this, but we don't know which bank Azerbaijani government used it to transfer these illegal assets. Do we able to recognize in US as like victims or also like whistleblowers? And what is our main mistake?
Sure. So the whistleblower laws are effective, most effective when you look at the financial flows. So in that case, say of a parliamentarian who took a bribe and may even have immunity, that person is, we get a whistleblower there, they are sunk. And not only are they sunk, but every financial institution that helped them is sunk. And their wealth is seized. So I'll just explain it. That's why money laundering is at the heart of it. Under the money laundering laws, every bank is supposed to know their customer, required. So if a foreign government official sets up an account, they're already considered suspicious, has to be monitored. Then every deposit made into that account, the bank is responsible for figuring out where the money came from. If the bank doesn't do know your customer, they are guilty, they are subject to massive fines and penalties. So first target, the bank. Second, once you didn't do the know your customer, so you also know they're also required to report every suspicious activity of 5,000 or more, the flows. So they'll get whacked even more. But now you go to the account holder, the person whose money is in the bank. I don't care if they have immunity from the heavens. Account seized, illicit gain. And then they can go through a very fun process known as asset forfeiture. Come to the United States, come to court, tell us how this money is all legitimate. And I tell you, they don't come in. They don't want to get arrested at the border. And if it's legitimate, it's legitimate. But the funds are frozen, asset forfeiture in the billions of dollars. So this corrupt official should have all their accounts frozen and then seized. Then, because it hit a bank, follow the money. Did the bank they transfer it to, did they do know your customer? Did they report suspicious activity? Does he still have some money in that account? Seized, sanctioned. Follow the bouncing ball. Oh, they bought a beautiful penthouse in Manhattan. Seized, sanctioned. So by following the illicit money, you can hold these people accountable where it hurts. So even they may be the president of some country and completely immune from any accountability, through these processes, they can be held accountable. And this is the beginning of a successful campaign against corruption. You have to start somewhere. And the laws are there. The weak links are there. The whistleblowers are there. So in this alliance we're trying to form, we must pull it together. Use our collective strength to push the United States to do more education, more resources. use our collective strength to finally get some other countries to start adopting these procedures, and use our collective strength to educate these whistleblowers. We owe it to them. To me, if there's a person who could have benefited from this but didn't, that, to me, that's just very bad. Are we out?
1
No.
minute
Oh,
question.
sure.
What should other states, we have like EU member states here, what is your address to them? Do they able to start same initiatives, legislative initiative here in Europe?
Yes. So
What other
yeah.
UN member states should do?
The United States, when asked, will cooperate. They've sent me to 5 or 6 different countries already. The embassies have paid for it. They've sent delegations to the United States. We can work with the governments of any country, the anti-corruption commissions we will work with, but from our perspective, the key are human rights defenders who are on the front lines dealing with these whistleblowers, who get there and who deal with them, news media that's also on the front lines, and then just to add something else, they changed the definition of whistleblower from your traditional insider, which still is covered, but also to an analyst who pulls information together. This is a journalist, human rights defenders who might be dealing with 2 or 3 whistleblowers or looking at some corruption where they're doing some illegal drilling or tearing down forests. And they can put the facts together and they qualify. And then in some of our cases, we unite the human rights defender or the NGO representative with the whistleblower, because we need people on the ground. We need people, if they're whistleblowers, say from Brazil or Mexico, it's really important to have someone in Brazil or Mexico. So,
Unfortunately,
okay.
I'll
We're
have
done.
I'll have to pause you because we need
Thank
to wrap
you.
it up and give the room to the next organization. But I'm extremely thankful for you to join us today. I think our audience is as stunned as I am about the things we learned, and I encourage everyone to get the book and the information sheet in the entrance. And I would like to believe that today's discussion would be a positive shift to our common fight against corruption.
Thank you, and
so
thank
much.
you all for attending. I'll probably be over in the cafeteria hanging out so you can come and chat. Thank you. And thank you, ma'am.